He stood there, champagne in hand, his white mistress draped on his arm like a trophy. He didn't see me walk in. Why would he? He thought I was home, broken, crying over the names he called me. But baby, I wasn't crying. I was planning. And tonight, his whole world was about to crumble. Listen, if you've ever been underestimated, disrespected, or made to feel less than because of how you look or the color of your skin, this story is for you. Stay with me till the end, because I'm about to show you how a black woman rises from the ashes and burns down everything that tried to destroy her. Hit that subscribe button, because you won't want to miss how this ends. My name is Helena Grace, and 12 years ago, I thought I was living a fairy tale. But let me tell you something about fairy tales. They don't tell you what happens when the prince turns out to be the villain. I grew up on the South Side. My mama cleaned houses for rich white families while I did my homework in their kitchens. She worked herself to the bone so I could have a chance at something better. I watched her scrub their toilets, wash their dishes, raise their kids while they looked right through her like she was invisible. And I promised myself I would never be invisible. I would never let anyone make me feel less than. So I worked 3 jobs to put myself through business school. I studied while other girls were out partying. I pushed through every professor who doubted me, every internship that passed me over, every interview where they looked surprised that I could speak properly. You know that look, that, oh, you're so articulate for a black woman look. Yeah, that one. By the time I was 30, I had made a name for myself in finance. I was sharp, I was brilliant, and I was hungry. That's when I met Preston Wellington III. Old money, real estate empire, and a company that was bleeding money faster than he could count it. His board hired me as a consultant, and within 6 months, I had restructured everything. I saved his entire empire from bankruptcy. Preston was charming back then. Tall, handsome, successful, or so everyone thought. He pursued me hard, flowers every day, expensive dinners. He told me I was the smartest woman he'd ever met. He said I was beautiful, that my skin glowed like gold, that he loved everything about me, and I believed him. God, I wanted to believe him. His family, though, that was a different story. The first time I met his mother, she looked at me like I had crawled out of a sewer. She didn't shake my hand. She just stared at me with this cold, disgusted expression and said, "Preston, darling, is this some kind of joke?" His father pulled him aside, and I heard every word. "You're throwing away our legacy for her. For a black woman, what will our friends think?" But Preston told me he didn't care. He said he loved me. He said we would prove them all wrong. So when he proposed, I said yes. I thought love could conquer anything. I thought I had finally made it. A girl from the South Side marrying into one of the richest families in the country. The headlines called us barrier breakers, progressive, a modern love story. What they didn't know was that I was the one running everything. Every business deal Preston closed, I structured it. Every contract he signed, I negotiated it. Every million he made, I was the brain behind it. But he took all the credit, and I let him, because I thought we were a team. I thought we were building something together. But slowly things started to change. The compliments stopped. The respect faded. It started small. Comments about my hair. "Can you straighten it for the company dinner? You know, look more professional." Professional meant less black. I knew that. Then it was my body. "Maybe skip dessert tonight, Helena. You're getting a little thick." I'm a size 14, healthy, strong, beautiful. But to him, I was becoming an embarrassment. His friends made jokes, racist jokes. Preston's got jungle fever. They'd laugh over cigars and whiskey. And he would laugh right along with them. He'd look at me across the room and smile, like it was all harmless fun, like those words didn't cut me every single time. At charity events, people would ask me where I was from, and when I said the South Side, they'd nod slowly. Like that explained everything, like I was some project he took on, some diversity experiment. Then came the big one. 3 years into our marriage, I brought up having children. I was ready. I wanted a family. And he looked at me with this cold expression and said, "I don't want mixed children. Helena, I don't want to complicate my family line. That's when I knew I wasn't his wife. I was his temporary diversity badge. And when he was done with me, he'd throw me away. But I'm not stupid. I started keeping records. Every email, every contract, every conversation. I documented everything because I knew, deep down, I always knew this was going to end badly. And when it did, I was going to be ready. 2 weeks before our annual charity gala, the biggest event of the year, Preston came home at 3 in the morning, drunk, reeking of perfume that wasn't mine. I was waiting for him in the living room, calm as ever. I asked him one simple question: "Where were you?" And that's when he exploded. That's when the mask finally came off completely. You want to know where I was? I was with someone who actually looks like a woman, someone who doesn't embarrass me every time we go out in public. His words were slurred, but every syllable was clear. Every word was chosen to hurt. "You're a fat pig, Helena. You're black, you're fat, and I'm tired of pretending I'm okay with it." I sat there, frozen, not because I was shocked, but because I was finally hearing the truth I'd always known. He kept going. "My mistress, Brooklyn. She's everything you're not. She's white. She's thin. She's beautiful. She looks like a Wellington wife should look. Not like some ghetto project I picked up to look progressive." He laughed. It was cruel and cold. "You should be grateful I even looked at someone like you. You should be grateful I gave you this life. Without me, you'd still be scrubbing floors like your mama." That last part, that's what did it. Bringing my mother into it. My mother who worked herself to death so I could be more than a maid. My mother who taught me dignity and strength. I stood up slowly. I looked him dead in the eye, and I said, "You just made the biggest mistake of your life." He laughed. "What are you going to do? Leave? Good luck. My lawyers already have the divorce papers ready. You'll get nothing. I'll make sure everyone knows you were just a diversity hire, that you contributed nothing to this family, that you were lucky I even married you." I smiled, a real smile. "We'll see." The next morning, I got to work. I called my best friend Diane, one of the best attorneys in the country, and a black woman who had fought her way to the top just like me. I called my mentor Luther, a media mogul who had built his empire despite every door being slammed in his face, and I pulled out every file I'd been keeping for 12 years. Diane looked through everything and whistled low. "Girl, you own him. You know that, right? He's been so busy underestimating you, he forgot you're smarter than everyone in that company combined." She was right. The prenup I had written myself, the one his lawyers had approved without reading carefully because they assumed I was just some grateful black woman who wouldn't dare ask for much, gave me 50% of everything. Everything. Every property, every investment, every business deal. And I had proof that I had built it all. But I wanted more than money. I wanted justice. I wanted the world to see who Preston Wellington really was. So we planned. The annual Wellington Charity Gala was in 2 weeks, the biggest night of the year. Every wealthy person in the city would be there. Every camera, every reporter. Preston thought I wouldn't show up. He told everyone I was too embarrassed, too broken, too ashamed. The night of the gala, I got ready slowly. I chose a custom burgundy gown that hugged every curve of my body. I wore my natural hair in an elegant crown, not straightened, not hidden, but proud and beautiful. I put on the diamond earrings I had bought for myself with my own money, and I looked in the mirror and saw a queen. When I arrived at the gala, I stayed outside for a moment. Through the glass doors, I could see Preston. He had his arm wrapped around Brooklyn, a 24-year-old blonde woman who used to be his secretary. She was wearing the diamond necklace he'd promised me for our 10th anniversary. They were laughing, kissing, acting like he was a single man. I watched as Preston walked to the microphone. He smiled that charming smile and said, "Thank you all for coming tonight. My wife Helena unfortunately couldn't make it this evening. She's not feeling well." The crowd murmured sympathetically, but I knew what he meant. He was telling everyone it was over, that he was done with the black wife experiment, That Brooklyn was the new Mrs. Wellington. That's when I walked in. The doors opened, and every head turned. The entire ballroom went silent. I walked slowly, deliberately, my heels clicking on the marble floor like a countdown. I saw Preston's face go white. I saw Brooklyn's confusion. I saw the shock ripple through the crowd. I walked straight to the stage. Preston tried to step in front of me, but security, my security, the team I had hired and paid for, blocked him. I took the microphone from his hand and smiled at the crowd. "Good evening, everyone," I said, my voice steady and strong. "I apologize for my husband's confusion. He told you I wasn't coming tonight. What he meant to say was, he hoped I wouldn't come. He hoped I would stay home, broken and silent, while he paraded his mistress in front of all of you." The crowd gasped. Phones came out. Cameras started recording. This was about to go viral, and I knew it. You see, Preston has spent the last 12 years benefiting from my black brilliance while trying to dim my light. He married me because I saved his company. I pulled him out of bankruptcy. I built his empire with my own hands, my own mind, my own strategy, and for 12 years, I let him take the credit because I thought we were partners. I thought we were building something together. I could see people in the crowd nodding. The few black guests were standing now, watching me with pride in their eyes. But 2 weeks ago, my husband came home drunk and told me the truth. He called me a fat pig. He told me I embarrass him. He said I should go back to the ghetto where I belong. He told me his white mistress is everything I'm not. White, thin, and acceptable. More gasps. Brooklyn tried to leave, but the crowd was too thick. Preston was trying to get to the stage, yelling at security, but no one was listening to him. This was my moment. Preston thought he could erase me. He had his lawyers draft divorce papers, claiming I contributed nothing to his success. That I was just a diversity hire. That I was lucky he even married me. I pulled out a folder and held it up. But I have receipts. Behind me, the screen lit up with documents, emails from his executives praising my strategies, contracts with my signature and my notes, financial reports showing exactly how I had tripled his wealth, text messages from Preston to his friends making racist jokes about me, and recordings, audio recordings of him calling me every name you can imagine. Every deal he closed, I structured it. Every contract he signed, I negotiated it. This empire, I built it. And he wanted to tell the world I was nothing, that I was just some black woman who should be grateful. The crowd was in chaos now. Some people were clapping. Others were trying to leave. Preston's friends looked horrified. The media was eating it up. "So here's what's going to happen," I continued, my voice rising with power. "As of tonight, I own 50% of everything Preston has. My lawyers filed the paperwork an hour ago. And unlike him, I actually read the prenup I wrote. Every property, every investment, every business deal, half of it is mine, and I'm taking it." Preston finally broke through security and grabbed the microphone. "She's lying. She's crazy. Don't listen to her." I looked at him calmly. "Am I lying, Preston? Should we play the recordings? Should I tell everyone what you said about our potential children? How you didn't want to complicate your family line with mixed kids?" He went pale. The crowd turned on him instantly. People started booing. His business partners were already on their phones, distancing themselves from him. Brooklyn had disappeared into the crowd, the diamond necklace abandoned on a table. I walked off that stage with my head held high. Within 72 hours, Preston's board voted him out. His business partners pulled their investments. Major clients canceled their contracts because nobody wants to work with a racist. Brooklyn left him the second his bank account started looking thin. And his family, they disowned him to save their own reputation. As for me, I took my half of everything and built something better. I started Grace Capital, an investment firm dedicated to funding Black entrepreneurs and Black-owned businesses. I used my story to speak at conferences, to mentor young Black women, to show them that they don't have to accept disrespect to be successful. My charity expanded nationwide, helping kids from neighborhoods just like the one I grew up in. 6 months later, I was on the cover of Forbes, the Black Queen who took back her crown. Preston was working a mid-level job at a company that wouldn't have hired him if I hadn't saved his reputation years ago. He lost everything: money, power, respect, dignity. And me? I'm richer than I ever was with him. I'm happier than I ever was with him. I'm free. Here's what I learned through all of this. They will try to use you. They will benefit from your magic while trying to convince you that you're ordinary. They will take your ideas, your work, your brilliance, and claim it as their own. And when they're done, they'll try to throw you away like you never mattered. But baby, you matter. You are powerful. You are brilliant. You are enough. And you don't need anyone's validation to know your worth. When someone shows you who they really are, believe them. And when they try to erase you, make sure you have receipts. Document everything. Protect yourself. Know your value. And never let anyone pay you less than what you're worth. Preston thought he could break me. He thought calling me names and replacing me with someone who looked different would make me disappear. But he forgot one very important thing. I wasn't some weak woman who needed him. He needed me. He always did. And when he tried to throw me away, I took back everything I built and left him with nothing. So if you're in a situation where someone is making you feel small, where someone is benefiting from your work while disrespecting you, where someone is using your race or your body or anything about you to tear you down, remember this story. Remember that you have power. Remember that you can take it back. And remember that revenge is best served when you're standing on top of the empire you built while they're looking up from the bottom. If this story fired you up, if it reminded you of your power, drop a comment and tell me, what's your empire? What are you building that nobody can take from you? Subscribe to this channel because we're telling more stories of Black excellence, resilience, and revenge. Hit that like button if Helena is your new hero. And remember, you're not just a chapter in someone else's story. You're the author of your own. Now go write your ending.
Peter Harrow always believed that every old house held a story. As a real estate millionaire, Peter had a unique passion, hunting down and restoring old homes, transforming them into structures that bore the breath of modernity while preserving their original beauty. That was how he built his reputation and amassed his fortune. On a crisp autumn day, as Peter returned to the small town where he grew up, he happened to drive past the road leading up to Harrow Hill. Standing tall atop the hill was an old mansion, its roof moss-covered and windows layered with dust. Harrow Manor, its name evoked memories of the town's prosperous past. Peter pulled over by the roadside, his gaze fixed on the worn sign hanging in front of the rusted iron gate. For sale. Contact the local government for details. The house had been abandoned for years, but in Peter's memory it was a symbol of grandeur. The Harrow family had once been one of the wealthiest and most influential families in the area. The mansion, built in the early 20th century, bore Victorian architectural style with high arches and intricate carvings. However, its last owner, Robert Harrow, had passed away without an heir, leaving the house to fall into disrepair. Childhood memories flooded back as Peter recalled standing at a distance with friends, gazing curiously at the mansion, wondering about the life inside. To him, the house resembled a mysterious castle, hiding untold stories. But after Robert Harrow's death, no one paid attention to it. The mansion grew cold and desolate over time. Deciding to leave his car, Peter stepped through the old gate, following the cracked stone path leading to the front of the house. Standing before the large door, he could feel the chill and silence that enveloped the place. This place has potential, he thought to himself. Peter's investor instinct saw value where others overlooked it. Peter quickly contacted the local authorities for more information. The property auction was scheduled just days later, with no competing bidders. Peter acquired Harrow Manor for far less than he had anticipated. This might be the best deal of the year, Peter thought as he signed the transfer documents. As he held the keys to Harrow Manor, Peter felt something different. This mansion was unlike any project he had ever undertaken. Something about it intrigued him, an inexplicable curiosity. On the first day he stepped into the mansion, Peter sensed that the air carried traces of the past. Old portraits of the Harrow family still hung on the walls, with thick layers of dust covering everything, like a blanket that concealed time. The wooden staircase creaked under his steps as he ascended to the second floor. "This house, it feels alive," Peter murmured. Despite knowing the house had been uninhabited for years, Peter felt an odd presence. An unfamiliar sensation crept over him as he pushed open the door to the library, as if someone still lived there. That was when Peter realized Harrow Manor wasn't as empty as he had thought. When Peter returned to inspect the mansion in detail after completing the purchase, he never expected that he wouldn't be the only one there. That cloudy morning, faint light filtered through the dust-laden windows. Peter stepped inside, holding a flashlight that cast beams across the dim interior. The silence was so profound that he could hear his own footsteps echoing through the large room. However, as Peter approached the staircase, he heard faint noises from the upper floor. His steps halted immediately. Peter frowned, his eyes narrowing. This house has been abandoned for years. Could it be? Switching off the flashlight, Peter ascended the stairs carefully. His footsteps, combined with the creaking floorboards, created unsettling sounds in the empty space. Near the door of a small room at the end of the hallway, Peter clearly heard the noises, soft whispers, and the gentle giggles of a child. Slowly, he pushed the door open. Before Peter was a scene he hadn't anticipated. A young woman with long brown hair, dressed simply but neatly, sat beside a boy around 4 or 5 years old. They appeared to have just finished eating a modest meal of canned food on an old table. The woman looked up, her eyes filled with fear as they met Peter's gaze. She quickly stood, pulling the child toward her in a protective reflex. "I'm sorry. We didn't mean to intrude or steal anything. We just have nowhere else to go," she said softly, her voice trembling with worry. Peter stood still, observing them for a few seconds before lowering the flashlight. "I didn't know anyone was living here." The woman lowered her head, holding the child closer. "I'm Amy, and this is my son, Leo." Peter looked at the child, whose large blue eyes gazed at him curiously but without fear. "How long have you been here?" Peter asked, his tone losing its initial sternness. Amy sighed. "We've been here for about 9 months. My home was gone after an incident, and I couldn't afford to rent another. I knew this place was abandoned, so we stayed temporarily." Peter glanced around the room. Despite being in an abandoned house, the space where Amy and Leo stayed was relatively clean and carried a hint of warmth. Thin blankets spread on the bed, and a few neatly stacked toys in the corner. He exhaled, looking directly at Amy. "I could call the police, but I won't." Amy looked up, eyes wide in surprise. "I just bought this house and plan to renovate it. You and Leo can stay temporarily, but on one condition." "What condition?" Amy asked, still hesitant. "You'll help me clean and restore the house. If I do it alone, it'll take months." Peter shrugged, his eyes shifting to Leo. "Think of it as mutual benefit." Amy was silent for a moment before she nodded gently. "Thank you. I truly appreciate it." From that day, Peter was no longer the only one at Harrow Manor. Welcome to Soul Stories. Today we bring you a heartwarming tale. Let us know which city you're tuning in from around the world. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel to catch more meaningful stories. In the morning, Amy and Leo helped Peter clean each room, gathering old, unusable items and bringing them to the yard. Leo, though still young, tried to help his mother by sweeping the yard or collecting fallen leaves in the back garden. Peter gradually realized that the presence of the mother and child brought the house to life. Leo's laughter echoed through the hallways as he played. Amy often brought Peter a cup of hot tea after long hours of work, and sometimes she cooked simple but heartwarming meals for the three of them. That evening, all three sat by the fireplace, the flickering flames casting shadows on the old walls of Harrow Manor. Leo had fallen asleep on the chair, his head resting on Amy's lap. Peter flipped through a few pages of his design notebook, then placed it on the table, his gaze lingering on the dancing flames. "It's strange to think that this is the first time I've felt warmth in this place," Peter spoke, breaking the silence. Amy pulled the blanket over Leo, smiling softly. Old houses are often like that. Just a little warmth can brighten the whole space. Peter nodded slightly. Maybe buying this place was the right decision. Amy looked at him for a moment, then hesitated. Did you buy it just to renovate and sell it? Peter looked at her, smiling lightly but with a hint of reflection. At first, yes, but now, I'm not so sure. Maybe I found something more valuable than selling it. Amy adjusted the blanket for Leo, her voice softening. I once had a small house, but everything changed too quickly. After my husband passed away, I had no choice but to leave. We lost everything. Peter remained silent, his gaze softening. I'm sorry. No need. Life goes on. Amy looked up, offering a faint smile. And thanks to you, at least Leo has a place to sleep peacefully. Thank you, Peter. Without you, I don't know what would have happened to the two of us. Peter stayed silent, his eyes resting on Leo, the innocent child sleeping soundly. Maybe I should be the one thanking you. Since you and Leo came, I realize this house is no longer just a project. It's a home. Amy smiled gently, a soft and warm smile. The two sat in silence, feeling the strange connection growing between them. Something neither of them had expected when they first stepped into Harrow Manor. When Peter started renovating Harrow Manor, he hired a construction team to repair the mansion. The next morning, the team began fixing the roof and electrical systems. Peter and Amy had a simpler task, cleaning and restoring old furniture that could still be used. At least we don't have to do everything ourselves, Amy sighed in relief as she watched the workers remove damaged sections of the ceiling. While cleaning the library, Peter accidentally discovered a loose brick in the fireplace. When he gently pushed it, the brick slid inward, revealing a small cavity behind it. Amy, come here! I think there's something in here! Peter called out. Amy put down the broom and curiously approached. Together they removed the brick, uncovering an old wooden box hidden deep inside the wall. Peter carefully lifted the box, brushing off the thick layer of dust. This box looks very old. It must have been here for decades. When the lid was opened, both of them were stunned to see letters carefully tied with a faded silk ribbon. Amy gently took out one of the letters, opened it, and read aloud. The treasure is not just my possession, but a hope for the community. If anyone finds it, I hope they use it to help the town. The atmosphere in the room seemed to shift. Peter looked at Amy, curiosity mixed with confusion in his eyes. A treasure? Do you think Robert Harrow really hid something here? Amy nodded slightly, her eyes filled with contemplation. I'm not sure, but if this is true, we might be standing before a great secret. From that day on, the renovation continued, but it seemed that in Peter and Amy's hearts, their focus had shifted. A new search had begun, a search for the treasure Robert Harrow had left behind, and perhaps a chance to write a new chapter for Harrow Manor in this small town. Each passing day, Peter's curiosity about the mysterious letters grew stronger. Robert Harrow's words hinted not just at a hidden treasure, but at a legacy and hope he had left behind. Amy and Leo were just as eager, and the three of them began their search. On the first weekend morning of their journey, Peter called in a team of workers to continue the renovation of the manor. Everything seemed normal, but Peter couldn't take his eyes off the metal door in the basement he had found earlier. While the workers busied themselves on the upper floors, Peter, Amy, and Leo returned to the basement. We'll start here, Peter said, placing his hand on the cold, dust-covered door. Amy shivered slightly. It looks like it's been locked for a long time. There might be nothing inside, but we can't overlook it, Peter said as he grabbed a crowbar and began to pry gently. After several attempts, the door finally creaked open with a heavy snap, revealing a small room filled with cobwebs. The damp, cold air washed over them. Leo clutched his mother's hand. Uncle Peter, what's in there? The flashlight beam scanned the room. There were only a few old wooden crates and discarded items. But in the corner, hidden among dusty tarps, lay a small iron chest. Peter knelt down, carefully dragging the chest to the center of the room. The lock was rusted, but a hard hit with the crowbar was enough to break it open. When the lid lifted, Amy and Leo gasped. Inside were bundles of old cash, a few gold bars and silver jewelry. It's not much, Peter murmured, his eyes reflecting slight disappointment. Amy shook her head. Even if it's little, this proves Robert Harrow really did hide something. Maybe there's more elsewhere in this house. Peter nodded in agreement. Although this sum was just a small portion, it fueled his determination to keep searching. The mansion was renovated, but the search continued for months. Every corner of Harrow Manor was explored, from the backyard shed to the very bricks in the hallways. But the deeper they searched, the more they felt a mysterious atmosphere surrounding the house. One late afternoon, as the workers were preparing to leave, one of them approached Peter. "I noticed something strange about a wall in the library. It sounds hollow when you knock on it. It might just be the old structure, but you should check it out." Peter paused. "And which wall?" "The one behind the large bookshelf." Without hesitation, Peter and Amy pulled the bookshelf aside. As the worker had said, the wall behind it gave off a hollow sound. Excitement flickered in their hearts. "I think we found something," Amy said softly, a smile forming on her lips. "Let me try," Peter said, grabbing the crowbar and carefully chipping at the wall. Chunks of plaster fell away, revealing a small cavity. As the last piece was removed, a large safe appeared behind the wall. Amy stood frozen. "We actually found it," Leo cheered. "Uncle Peter, open it! It's the treasure!" But it wasn't that simple. The safe was tightly locked, and Peter knew breaking into it would take time. That night, Peter sat in front of the safe, flashlight in hand, reading through each of Robert Harrow's old letters. Amy sat beside him, going over every clue they had. "I think the password might be related to the town or the Harrow family," Peter mused. "Maybe Robert's birth year," Amy suggested. After numerous attempts, the safe finally opened with the code 1923, Robert Harrow's birth year. The door creaked open heavily. Inside they found bundles of carefully wrapped cash, gleaming gold bars, valuable documents including shares in a local company. The total value was estimated at millions of dollars. Leo's mouth fell open. "That's a lot of money." Amy was speechless, while Peter stood in silence, overwhelmed by mixed emotions. Resting atop the treasure was a letter, perhaps Robert Harrow's final one. "This treasure is not mine alone, but a gift to the town. If anyone finds it, use it to build schools, hospitals, and help those less fortunate. This is my final wish." Peter sighed, reading the letter over and over again. Peter sat alone in the Harrow Estate Library, the dim light from a small lamp casting shadows on the old walls. The safe was now empty, but the papers and gold bars inside seemed to linger in his mind. Each figure, each glimmering bar of gold haunted him for days. That money, millions of dollars, could change Peter's life forever. Peter was no stranger to wealth, but something made him hesitate. This treasure was not his to claim. It was the legacy Robert Harrow left behind, meant to serve the community. "If I keep the money, who will ever know?" Peter wondered, gently turning over Robert's letters. The words on the pages felt like a reminder he couldn't ignore. "This treasure is my final hope for the town. Use it to help those in need." Peter sighed, leaning back in his chair. A few days after finding the safe and Robert Harrow's final letter, Peter still hadn't decided what to do with the money. That evening, after Leo had gone to bed, Peter and Amy sat together on the garden bench behind the estate. The moonlight filtered through the old trees, and the air was filled with the soft hum of insects. Peter leaned back, his gaze fixed on the starry sky, while Amy sat beside him, hands wrapped around a warm cup of tea. "Ever since I bought this place, things have changed faster than I expected," Peter said softly, his voice thoughtful. "I never imagined that finding an old safe and a few letters would make me think this much." Amy turned to look at Peter, her eyes gentle but serious. "I understand. Facing that much money isn't easy, but I believe you'll make the right choice." Peter sighed, his fingers tapping lightly on the armrest. "When I bought this house, it was just a real estate project. Fix it up, sell it, make a profit. That was the plan." Amy smiled softly. "And now? Do you still want to sell it?" Peter shook his head, looking down at his hands. "No, I'm not so sure anymore. When you and Leo came here, this house started to feel like home. It's not just a project anymore. It's a place where people laugh, where I feel like I belong." Amy was quiet for a moment, then gently placed her cup of tea on the table. "Peter, I believe this estate has found its new owner, someone who won't let it fall into neglect again. You don't have to decide about the money right away. But if Robert Harrow believed it could help the community, then maybe that's what it should do." Peter turned to Amy, his eyes holding something she couldn't quite read. "What do you think I should do?" Peter asked, his voice low and sincere. Amy smiled, her gaze drifting to the second-floor window where Leo was sleeping peacefully. "If it were me, I'd think about Leo. I want him to grow up in a world where people help each other, where those who have can share to create something better." Peter followed Amy's gaze, quietly nodding. "Leo's a great kid. I'm glad you brought him here." Amy rested her head lightly on Peter's shoulder, feeling the warmth radiating from him. "We're lucky to have met you. Thank you, Peter." "No, I should be thanking you," Peter replied, his eyes staring off into the distance. "You and Leo gave me a reason to see things differently." A gentle breeze swept through the garden, carrying the scent of flowers. The Harrow estate was no longer an abandoned house. It had become a home. The next morning, Leo ran into the library with a toy car in hand. He plopped down on the floor and started playing, but after a few minutes, he looked up at Peter, his eyes bright with curiosity. "Uncle Peter, if you had lots of money, what would you do?" Leo asked suddenly. Peter was surprised by the innocent question. "I don't know. Maybe I'd fix this house or buy a few more places," Peter replied casually. Leo frowned thoughtfully, then grinned wide. "If it were me, I'd build a big park," Leo said excitedly, "so all the kids could play. There's nothing to do here but run through the fields." Peter froze. Leo's words echoed in his mind, like a ray of light cutting through the fog. A park, simple but meaningful. To children like Leo, happiness wasn't in numbers on a bank statement, but in moments of play and laughter on green fields. Peter looked at Leo, then at Amy. She stood quietly by the window, smiling softly at her son's excitement. "A park, huh?" Peter murmured. The next day, Peter drove through the small town, watching the familiar streets. The town felt like it had been asleep for years, with old houses and quiet roads. He stopped in front of an empty lot near the town center. This was once where the children gathered to play when Peter was young. But now the grass was overgrown, and the playground had been dismantled long ago. Maybe Leo was right, Peter thought. Returning to the estate, Peter sat down across from Amy and Leo. "I've made a decision." Amy and Leo both looked up, waiting for his answer. "I'm going to use the money to fulfill Robert's wish. We'll build a park for the kids and use the rest to support the community." Leo jumped up in excitement. "Really, Uncle Peter? You'll build a park?" Peter ruffled Leo's hair. "Yes, but not just a park. We'll build a small library and fix up the town school too." Amy looked at Peter, her eyes sparkling. "Are you sure? This will change a lot of things." "I'm sure, instead of making more money, maybe it's time I gave something back to this place." Leo threw his arms around Peter. "You're the best!" Peter laughed, warmth filling his chest. Amy whispered, "Robert Harrow would be proud of what you're doing." A light morning mist covered the town, and warm golden sunlight filtered through the trees outside the Harrow estate. A long table was set in the front garden of the estate, surrounded by chairs for the guests. The townspeople gathered in large numbers, eagerly awaiting the official groundbreaking ceremony to begin. Peter stood by the library window, gazing outside. He adjusted his tie, feeling the weight of both pressure and emotion. The project he was about to start was not just a construction effort, but the continuation of a long-standing legacy. "Are you ready?" Amy stepped in, smiling gently as she noticed Peter's tense expression. "Maybe," Peter replied, but deep down he knew that what he was about to do was necessary. Amy stood beside him, her eyes filled with pride. "Today is meaningful. You're not just changing this estate, you're changing the entire town." Peter looked at Amy, feeling the importance of her presence throughout the project. No one understood the significance of it like Amy, someone who had faced hardship and once found shelter in this very place. "Thank you, Amy. Without you, I don't think I could have done this. We made this happen together, Peter." At 10 a.m., Peter and Amy stepped out in front of the estate. The crowd quickly quieted as Peter approached the podium. He stood there looking down at familiar faces, old friends, neighbors, and the children of the town. Leo sat in the front row, waving with a bright smile. "Ladies and gentlemen," Peter began, his voice calm yet sincere. "Today we are not just beginning a construction project. We are continuing the legacy of Robert Harrow, a man who believed that a strong community is the foundation of lasting growth." He paused, allowing his words to sink in. "When I bought the Harrow estate, I didn't expect to find more than just old walls. Robert's letters revealed a part of history I never knew. He was not just a wealthy man, but someone with immense love for this town. Robert hoped the fortune he left behind would build a better future for everyone." The crowd began murmuring, but hope sparkled in their eyes. "Today I stand here," Peter continued, "to announce that the entire treasure left by Robert Harrow will be used to build a park, a new school, and a small hospital for our town." Applause erupted. Smiles, nods of approval, and even tears of joy appeared on the faces of many in the crowd. "The greatest treasure," Peter said, glancing at Amy and Leo, "is not money or gold, but the love and unity of a community. I believe this is how the Harrow family's final wish will be fulfilled." Amy quietly wiped away tears of happiness. Peter could feel the joy spreading throughout the gathering. As the ceremony concluded, construction work began quickly. Amy took charge of managing the project, overseeing everything from hiring the construction team to coordinating with architects. She worked with passion and meticulous care because, more than anyone, Amy understood how important this project was to the community. "Are you sure you want to handle so much?" Peter asked one afternoon as they sat in the library planning. Amy smiled, her eyes unwavering. "I've lived through hardship. I know how much a hospital or a school can change lives. If I can help, I'll give it my all." "I know you'll do great," Peter said, proud of Amy. 3 months later, the first community center was completed. Peter and Amy stood outside, watching children play on the open lawn, while adults gathered inside the new building for classes and activities. Leo ran over and tugged on Peter's hand. "Uncle Peter, can I go inside?" "Of course, Leo, you were one of the first to help make this happen." Peter laughed. Leo rushed into the building, his laughter echoing around the area. "I think Robert Harrow would be proud of what we've done," Amy whispered, leaning gently against Peter's shoulder. Peter nodded, his eyes glowing with pride and happiness. "I think so too, but I'm prouder of you, Amy." The charity project didn't just change the town, it changed Peter as well. He was no longer just a businessman focused on profit. He became part of the community, a friend, a supporter, and someone who brought hope to those around him. Amy and Leo were no longer just companions on this journey. They had become his family. "Thank you, Amy," Peter whispered as the three of them stood beneath the entrance to the community center. "Thanks to you, I finally understand the true meaning of treasure. And thanks to you, Leo and I have a real home." Peter looked down at Leo. The boy was joyfully playing with his friends. His heart swelled with gratitude and love. That afternoon, as the sunset bathed the small town in golden light, Peter knew he had found the most valuable treasure in his life. Not material wealth, but the family and community he had come to cherish. Are you still following the story? If yes, comment Coca-Cola. Ha. As the first rays of spring sunlight filtered through the trees in the garden of Harrow Estate, Peter decided to make today a special day, the day he would officially propose to Amy. Harrow Estate no longer bore the gloomy, desolate look it once had. The house had been beautifully restored, and the garden in the back bloomed with vibrant flowers of all colors, nurtured by Amy and Leo. Peter chose a peaceful afternoon, just as the sun began to set, to create an unforgettable moment. He led Amy to the back garden, the place where they had shared countless memories during the restoration of the house and the search for Robert Harrow's hidden treasure. "Amy, do you remember the first time we found the safe in the library?" Peter began, his eyes filled with warmth. Amy smiled softly, glancing toward the library wall visible through the window. "Of course I remember. At the time, I thought you would keep all the money and invest it in your own projects." Peter turned to her, gently taking her hand. "I thought so too, until I met you and Leo." Amy looked at Peter surprised as a wave of emotion rose within her. Amy, you and Leo changed my life. Without you, this estate would still be an empty house, and I would still be a lonely man chasing profits. Peter pulled a small box from his pocket and opened it to reveal a sparkling engagement ring. Amy, I don't want that anymore. I want us to be a real family. Will you marry me? Amy was stunned, her eyes welling up with tears. Peter, are you sure about this? I've never been more sure of anything, Peter smiled, his gaze sincere and unwavering. Leo, standing not far away, cheered excitedly as he realized what was happening. Mom, say yes. I want Uncle Peter to be my dad. Amy laughed through her tears, crouched down to hug Leo, then turned back to Peter. Yes, I will. Applause erupted from the townspeople nearby, who had secretly gathered to witness the moment. The wedding took place 3 months later, right in the garden behind Harrow Estate. Floral arches were elegantly decorated, with hundreds of blooming flowers creating a cozy and love-filled atmosphere. Amy wore a simple yet elegant white dress, walking gracefully down the petal-lined path. Peter stood at the end, his eyes never leaving her for a moment. When Amy placed her hand in Peter's, they exchanged loving glances. The officiant, an old family friend of Amy's, smiled as he witnessed the sacred moment. Today we are not just witnessing a wedding, but the beginning of a new family. Peter and Amy have built not only this house, but also a new future for our town. Peter gently squeezed Amy's hand, silently promising that he would always be by her side, no matter what. I promise to always protect and love you, Amy, and to always be a steadfast support for you and Leo. Amy smiled, tears of joy streaming down her cheeks. And I promise to stand by you, Peter, and be your partner in every challenge to come. As they shared their first kiss as husband and wife, Leo ran up to hug them tightly. Now we're really a family, Mom. From that day on, Harrow Estate became a symbol of healing, love, and kindness. Peter continued to expand community projects, building a small library and playground for the children in town. Amy took on the role of managing the community center, helping families in need. In the afternoons after school, Leo would often run around the garden, laughing and playing with the other children. This place isn't just an abandoned house anymore, Peter said one day as he stood with Amy on the balcony. It has become a home for many people. Amy rested her head on his shoulder, her eyes shining with happiness. And it's also the start of our family. As the sun set, Peter knew he had found the greatest treasure of his life. Not money, but the love and connection he had built with those around him. Sometimes the greatest treasure we find isn't wealth, but love, kindness, and the bonds we share with our community. The true value of an asset doesn't lie in owning it, but in how we use it to bring happiness to others. Thank you for following this story. Please rate it from 1 to 5 stars, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our Soul Stories channel. Your support is the motivation for us to continue bringing more great stories. Haha.
My husband's mistress was terrified of flying. So you know what he did? He kicked me off our private jet and gave her my seat. Left me stranded at the airport like I was nobody. He forgot one thing though. I wasn't just his wife. I was the one who built his empire. Before I tell you how I made him regret every single choice, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Trust me, you don't want to miss how this story ends. And drop a comment telling me what you would have done in my situation. Now, let me take you back to where it all started. My name is Nicole Harper, and 12 years ago, I married the man I thought was my soulmate, Dominic Harper. Back then, he had a small real estate company worth about $10 million. Nothing to sneeze at, but nothing spectacular either. I was 26, fresh out of business school, drowning in student debt, and working as his junior analyst. I came from nothing. My mother cleaned houses. My father drove trucks. I was the first person in my family to get a college degree, let alone an MBA. Dominic saw something in me, or at least that's what he said. I worked harder than anyone in that office. I stayed late, came in early, And I had this gift for seeing patterns in data that nobody else could see. Within 6 months, I'd helped him close 3 deals that doubled his revenue. He promoted me, then he asked me out. 6 months after that, we were married. Here's what nobody tells you about building an empire with someone. You pour everything into it. Your time, your energy, your connections, your reputation. I brought Dominic into rooms he never could have entered without me. See, I understood something he didn't. People needed to trust the face of the company, especially when you're dealing with big money. I had credibility in the Black business community. My professors vouched for me. My mentors opened doors. I convinced investors to take a chance on us when they would have laughed Dominic out of the room. 10 years later, we'd built a $2 billion real estate empire. We had properties in 15 states. We employed over 300 people. And through it all, I thought we were partners. I thought we were building our legacy together. But somewhere around month 6 of year 12, things started changing. Dominic became distant. He stopped coming home for dinner. He'd be on his phone constantly, texting someone and smiling in this way he used to smile at me. When I'd ask him about it, he'd say it was just work stress, new deals, new pressures. I wanted to believe him because the alternative was too painful to consider. Then he hired Heather, 28 years old, blonde, bubbly, and suddenly she was his new executive assistant. Every meeting, every trip, every late night at the office, Heather was there. My friends started giving me those looks. You know the ones. That pitying glance that says they know something you're trying not to see. My sister Angela kept telling me to trust my gut, but I didn't want to be that woman, the paranoid wife who sees threats everywhere. So I pushed it down, smiled at company events, and pretended everything was fine. Our 12th anniversary was coming up in September. Dominic surprised me by planning a trip to Paris. He said we needed this, just the two of us, reconnecting like we used to. I was so relieved. Maybe I had been paranoid. Maybe this was him showing me that I still mattered. I went shopping, bought this beautiful emerald dress he always said looked stunning on me. I got my hair done. I was actually excited for the first time in months. The morning of our trip, something felt off. Dominic was tense, checking his phone every 30 seconds. When I asked if everything was okay, he snapped at me about some deal that was taking longer to close than expected. I let it go. We were about to have 5 days in Paris. Whatever was bothering him could wait. We arrived at the private terminal around 6 that evening. Our jet was waiting on the tarmac, beautiful and sleek like always. I was already imagining croissants and morning walks along the Seine. Then I saw her, Heather, walking toward us with a rolling suitcase and this apologetic smile on her face. Dominic's whole body language changed when he saw her. He got nervous, started talking fast. "Nicole, slight change of plans. Heather needs to join us for a quick meeting in Paris. There's an investor who specifically requested she be there for the presentation." I felt my stomach drop, but I tried to stay calm. I asked why he didn't mention this before. He said it just came up. Last-minute thing, totally unavoidable. We boarded the plane. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. I sat in my usual seat, and Heather sat across from us. She looked uncomfortable, which honestly made me feel slightly better. At least she had the decency to seem awkward about crashing our anniversary trip. Then the pilot came over the speaker. "Mr. Harper, we're ready for departure. Flight time to Paris is approximately 8 hours. That's when Heather started crying. Not little tears, full-on sobbing. She said she couldn't do it. She was terrified of flying. She thought she could handle it, but she couldn't. Dominic immediately got up and sat next to her, holding her hand, stroking her hair, whispering to her like she was a frightened child. I sat there watching my husband comfort another woman with more tenderness than he'd shown me in 6 months. And that's when I finally saw it, really saw it. The way he touched her, the way she leaned into him, the familiarity between them. This wasn't new. This had been going on for a while. Dominic looked at me over Heather's head and asked if we could talk privately. We moved to the back of the plane, and that's when he said the words I'll never forget. "Nicole, I need you to take a commercial flight." Heather needs to go to Paris for this deal, and she can't fly alone. Not like this. I actually laughed. I thought he was joking, but his face was stone serious. I told him absolutely not. This was our anniversary trip. If Heather couldn't handle flying, she could stay home or get therapy or take medication, like every other adult who's afraid of flying. He said I was being selfish. This deal was worth $50 million. Heather needed to be there, and she needed someone to help her through the flight. I said, then you stay with her, and I'll go to Paris alone. He actually had the audacity to look offended. He said the investor needed him specifically. I asked why the investor needed Heather if he was going to be there anyway. He didn't have a good answer for that. The pilot announced we needed to take off in 10 minutes, or we'd lose our departure window. Dominic looked at me and said, please, Nicole, don't make this difficult. Just take a commercial flight tomorrow. I'll make it up to you. I told him if I got off that plane, I wasn't coming to Paris at all. He said fine, that was my choice. He called security, had them escort me off the plane. Me, his wife of 12 years, the woman who built his company from the ground up. They walked me down the stairs, handed me my luggage, and I stood there on that tarmac, watching the jet engine start up. I saw Dominic through the window, already sitting next to Heather, his arm around her shoulders. The plane took off, and I stood there feeling like someone had ripped my heart out of my chest and stomped on it. The driver didn't even know what to do. He kept asking if I wanted to go home. I couldn't speak, I just nodded. When I got home, I called Angela. She came over immediately, and I told her everything. For the first time in months, I stopped making excuses. I stopped pretending. My husband was having an affair, and he'd just chosen his mistress over me in the most humiliating way possible. Angela held me while I cried, and then she asked the question that changed everything. So what are you going to do about it? I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I started thinking clearly for the first time in months. See, when you're heartbroken, you can either fall apart or you can get focused. I got focused. I remembered something important. I had access to everything in Dominic's company. I'd built the financial systems. I'd set up the databases. I still had administrative access that Dominic didn't even know about because he never paid attention to the technical details. I spent that entire night going through files, bank statements, emails, contracts, offshore accounts. What I found made my blood run cold. Heather wasn't just his mistress. She was 4 months pregnant. Dominic had bought her a $3 million penthouse in Manhattan using company funds, not his personal money, company funds, which meant he was stealing from our investors. But it got worse. I found evidence of systematic tax evasion, fraud, and embezzlement going back at least 2 years. Dominic had been creating fake vendors, inflating expenses, and funneling money into offshore accounts. We're talking about $127 million. He'd been building a safety net for himself, probably planning to leave me and start over with Heather. Here's the thing about being the person who built the systems. You know where all the bodies are buried. And here's the thing about being a Black woman in corporate America. You learn early to keep records, document everything. Trust your work, not people's promises. I photographed everything, downloaded files to an encrypted drive. Then I called my mentor, Diane. She's a corporate lawyer, one of the toughest women I know. I sent her the evidence, and she called me back within an hour. Nicole, this is criminal, and you have ironclad proof. What do you want to do? What did I want? I wanted justice. I wanted him to feel even a fraction of what I felt standing on that tarmac. But more than that, I wanted to take back what was mine. This company existed because of me, my work, my connections, my reputation. Dominic had treated me like I was disposable, but he was about to learn exactly how valuable I really was. Diane and I spent the weekend building a strategy. Monday morning, Dominic sent me a text. "We need to talk." I replied, "Yes, we do." He wanted to meet Thursday. I said, "Wednesday, at the office." He probably thought I was going to cry and beg him to work on our marriage. He had no idea what was coming. On Monday and Tuesday, I met individually with every board member of the company. These were people I'd brought to the table, investors who trusted me, who'd watched me turn their money into gold for over a decade. I showed them the evidence of what Dominic had been doing. They were horrified. Their investments were at risk. The company could face criminal charges. Everything could collapse. Then I reminded them of something. I had built the systems that made this company run. I had the relationships with the major clients. I understood every deal, every property, every strategy. Dominic was the face, but I was the foundation. Without me, they had nothing but a criminal investigation and a crumbling empire. By Tuesday night, I had commitments from every board member. They would call for Dominic's resignation and install me as CEO if I could guarantee I'd stay and stabilize the company. I told them I would, but only if they acted immediately. I also filed for divorce on Tuesday, and I filed a lawsuit against Dominic and the company for theft of intellectual property. All those systems I built, I'd been smart enough to copyright them under my name. Diane also helped me file complaints with the SEC and notify the IRS of the tax fraud. Everything documented, everything airtight. Wednesday morning, I walked into that office like I owned it, because legally, morally, and practically, I did. Dominic was sitting at his desk, probably preparing some speech about how the affair didn't mean anything, how he still loved me, how we could work through this. I didn't even sit down. I slid a folder across his desk and said, "I'm not here about Heather. I'm here about the $127 million you've embezzled." The color drained from his face. He opened the folder and saw page after page of evidence: bank transfers, fake invoices, offshore account statements, everything. He started stammering, trying to explain. I cut him off. "The board wants your resignation by 5 p.m. today." He looked at me like I'd lost my mind. "You can't do this. You're my wife." I smiled. "Actually, as of Monday, I'm your ex-wife. Papers are filed. And as of this morning, I'm the new CEO. The board voted unanimously an hour ago. I'd arranged for security to be waiting outside. When Dominic tried to argue, tried to threaten me, I just nodded and they came in." He was screaming as they escorted him out, yelling about how I'd regret this, how I was nothing without him, how he'd made me. I sat down in his chair and said loud enough for him to hear as they dragged him away, "You left me on that tarmac like I was garbage. Now you know how it feels." The news broke that afternoon. Dominic Harper under federal investigation for fraud and embezzlement. The business press went crazy. But within 24 hours, I did interviews explaining that the company was stable, that I was implementing new oversight procedures, that investors were protected because I'd caught the fraud in time. Heather disappeared. Turns out, when there's no marriage and no money, mistresses tend to vanish. Last I heard, she moved back to wherever she came from. Dominic's lawyers tried to argue that I'd orchestrated some kind of coup, but the evidence was overwhelming. He ended up pleading guilty to avoid a longer sentence. In the 6 months after I took over, something amazing happened. The company didn't just survive, it thrived. I took us in a new direction, focusing on affordable housing and supporting Black women entrepreneurs. Our company value increased by 40% in the first year under my leadership. I made Angela my chief operating officer. We rebuilt that empire into something better, something that actually meant something. 6 months after everything went down, I ran into Dominic at the courthouse. He was there for a hearing before his sentencing. He looked like he'd aged 10 years. His lawyer was trying to negotiate the terms of his prison sentence. He was facing 15 years. He saw me and tried to approach. His lawyer told him not to, but he did anyway. "Nicole," he said, and his voice was small. "I never appreciated what I had." I looked at him, this man I'd loved for 12 years, this man who'd thrown me away like I meant nothing. "You appreciated it, Dominic. You just thought you deserved more." I walked away and didn't look back. Because here's what I learned. When someone shows you who they are, believe them. And when someone treats you as disposable, Show them exactly how indispensable you actually were. He thought I needed him. The truth, he needed me. I built that empire, my work, my connections, my reputation. When he threw me away, he threw away the foundation. And without a foundation, everything crumbles. So that's how it ended. He chose his mistress over his wife and lost everything. If this story taught you something about knowing your worth, smash that like button. Subscribe for more stories about people who underestimated the wrong one. And comment below, Team Nicole, or did I go too far? Also, drop a diamond emoji if you believe in never letting anyone dim your light. I'll see you in the next story. And remember, never let anyone make you feel small. You're the empire builder.